My name is Richard Whitaker, and I am 74 years old. For most of my life, I believed something very simple about family. I believed that when you spend your life building a home for your children, that home becomes a place filled with memories, not a prize waiting to be claimed. Unfortunately, life has a way of teaching you things far too late. The house where this story begins is a large, aging Victorian sitting on the corner of Maple Street in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland. It was built in 1912 by my grandfather. 3 floors, tall windows, wide wooden porches, and floors that creak in the exact same places they did when I was a child. To anyone else, it might just look like an old house, but to me, it was the center of my entire life. My father was born there. So was I. I learned to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk in front of that house. I carved my initials into the oak tree in the backyard when I was 12. And decades later, when I married my wife, Eleanor, we raised our 3 children inside those same walls. Mark, the oldest, Lisa, our daughter, and Daniel, the youngest. The house saw everything. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, late-night homework sessions at the dining room table. It saw laughter, arguments, tears, and love. When Eleanor passed away 9 years ago, the house suddenly became very quiet. Too quiet. Sometimes at night I would sit in the living room and swear I could still hear her humming softly in the kitchen. But even with the silence, I never considered leaving, because leaving that house felt like leaving my life behind. My children visited occasionally after Eleanor died. At first, their visits felt comforting, but slowly something began to change. The first sign was subtle. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting around the dining table after lunch. Mark had recently started working in real estate, and he was constantly talking about property values. He leaned back in his chair and looked around the room thoughtfully. "You know something, Dad?" he said. "What?" "This house could be worth a fortune now." Lisa nodded immediately, "Especially with the land." Daniel laughed. "Yeah, developers would probably fight over this place." I chuckled at the time. "You 3 sound like real estate agents." Mark grinned. "I'm serious, Dad. Houses around here are selling for crazy money." I shrugged. "Well, this one isn't for sale." Everyone laughed. The conversation moved on. But over the next few years, that same conversation returned again and again. Sometimes it was casual. Sometimes it wasn't. Mark once stopped by coffee and sat down on the back porch with me. "Dad," he said, "have you ever had the house appraised?" "No." "You should. I bet it's worth close to $1 million now." I sipped my coffee slowly. That doesn't change anything. Eleanor brought it up during Thanksgiving one year. "Honestly," she joked, "when Dad finally sells this place, we're all going to be rich." Everyone laughed, even me. But inside, something felt wrong. The way they talked about the house. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't love. It was calculation, numbers, property value, inheritance. Still, I ignored it until the day everything became crystal clear. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I had driven to the grocery store, but realized halfway there that I had forgotten my wallet. So I turned around and drove back home. When I walked through the front door, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Mark, Lisa, Daniel. They didn't know I was there. "We'd probably get at least $1.5 million, Mark was saying. Lisa sounded excited. "That's $500,000 each." Daniel laughed. "I'm already planning what I'd do with it." I stood quietly in the hallway. Mark continued, "Honestly, the sooner the better. This place is just sitting here." Then Lisa said something that made my chest tighten. "Dad's not getting any younger." There was a pause. Then Daniel added quietly, "When the time comes, we should sell immediately." The grocery bag slipped from my hands and landed softly on the floor. Not loud enough for them to hear, but loud enough for something inside me to finally break. In that moment, I understood something painful. My children weren't seeing the house as their childhood home. They were seeing it as a future payday. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the same living room where Eleanor and I had spent decades together. Photographs covered the walls. Eleanor smiling in the garden, Mark holding his first bicycle, Lisa blowing out candles on a birthday cake, Daniel wearing a baseball uniform 3 sizes too big. Every photo told a story. But my children weren't thinking about those stories. They were thinking about numbers. 1 million, 1.5 million. Inheritance. That night I made a decision. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. If my children believed the house was their future fortune, they were about to learn something important about assumptions. The next 6 months passed quietly. My children visited more often. They kept bringing up the same idea. "Dad, the house is too big for you. You should downsize. You could sell and move somewhere easier to maintain." Each time I nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe you're right." That answer seemed to make them happy. But while they were imagining their future, I was quietly changing it. 6 months later, I officially listed the house for sale. The reaction from my children was immediate. Mark called me within minutes. "You're serious about selling?" "Yes." "That's amazing, Dad." Lisa started talking about real estate agents. Daniel asked about the timeline. Within 3 weeks, the house had an offer. A developer wanted it. The price was excellent, better than anyone expected. My children were practically celebrating. Mark joked one evening, "Guess we should start planning what we'll do with the money." Lisa smiled. "Vacation for me." Daniel laughed. "I'm buying a new car." I listened quietly. Then I said something simple. "Don't worry, everything is already arranged." The day we met at the lawyer's office, my children walked in smiling. They looked excited, confident, certain. Mark sat down and rubbed his hands together. "So, how is the money divided?" The lawyer opened a folder calmly. "The proceeds from the sale have been distributed according to Mr. Whitaker's instructions." Mark nodded. "Right, so how is it split?" The lawyer looked up. "It isn't." Silence filled the room. Lisa frowned. "What do you mean?" The lawyer slid a document across the table. "Mr. Whitaker donated the entire amount." Daniel blinked. "What?" The lawyer continued calmly. 3 charitable organizations received the funds. Mark stared at me. "You gave it away?" "Yes." Lisa whispered. "All of it?" "Yes." Daniel shook his head. "But that was our inheritance." I looked at them quietly. "No, that house was my life." The room stayed silent. Finally, Mark asked softly, "Why would you do that?" I thought about the answer carefully. Then I said something simple. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing it as a home." I stood up slowly. "Maybe now you'll understand the difference." And with that, I walked out of the office. My children thought the old house was worth millions. They were right, just not in the way they imagined. Because some things in life are priceless. And sometimes